Welcome to the Daily Bible Reader Podcast. I am your host, Rakia Collins, and the mission of this podcast is to read the Bible from beginning to end every single year, starting in 2024. If that mission sounds interesting to you, I'd encourage you to grab your Bible and read along with me. And on today's episode, we are going to be reading Exodus chapter 4 through chapter 6. So let's go ahead and dive into Exodus chapter 4. Moses given powerful signs. Then Moses answered, "But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.'" The Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" He said, "A staff." And he said, "Throw it on the ground." So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, "Put out your hand and catch it by the tail." So he put out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. Again, the Lord said to him, "Put your hand inside your cloak." And he put his hand inside his cloak. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous, like snow. Then God said, "Put your hand back inside your cloak." So he put his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. "If they will not believe you," God said, "or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. If they will not believe even these two signs or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground." But Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue." Then the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now, therefore, go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak." But he said, "O my Lord, please send someone else." Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is there not Aaron your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. And take in your hand this staff with which you shall do the signs." Moses returns to Egypt. Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, "Please let me go back to my brothers in Egypt to see whether they are still alive." And Jethro said to Moses, "Go in peace." And the Lord said to Moses in Midian, "Go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead." So Moses took his wife and his sons and had them ride on a donkey and went back to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the staff of God in his hand. And the Lord said to Moses, "When you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles that I have put in your power. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, 'Thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son, and I say to you, let my son go that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your firstborn son.'" At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. Then Zorpah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it and said, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." So he let him alone. It was then that she said, "a bridegroom of blood," because of the circumcision. The Lord said to Aaron, go into the wilderness to meet Moses. So he went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. And Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord with which he had sent him to speak, and all the signs that he had commanded him to do. Then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the people of Israel. Aaron spoke all the words that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and did the signs in the sight of the people. And the people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel, and that he had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads in worship. There are a couple of places in chapter 4 that I want to hone in on. The first one coming from verses 3 through 5. So this is where we see so far that Moses and God are still engaging in a dialogue. And Moses is essentially asking God, what do I do if I go there and these people, they don't believe me? And if we get to verse 3, and he said, throw it on the ground, he being God. So Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. Verse 4, but the Lord said to Moses, put out your hand and catch it by the tail. So he put out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. What I love about that scenario is that we see that Moses is doubting himself and doubting what he has the ability to do, even though God has clearly chosen him to be the person that he wants to deliver his message to Pharaoh to let his people go. And so in this demonstration, we see that Moses runs from the sign that God gives him to deliver to the people. But the moment that he goes and runs, we see that God says, okay, now stick out your hand and touch the tail of the very thing that you ran from. And I love that because we can see in those two verses the fear of Moses juxtaposed with the faith that he has to do what the Creator tells him to do. And so he sticks out his hand and it changes back into a staff. We can see here that Moses's fear and his faith come back to back. But then when we drop down to verse 10 through 17, again, we're still seeing Moses's fear, but this isn't fear of an external circumstance. This is Moses's fear of his own inadequacies and his own deficiencies. And so at this point in this story, we see God still talking and having a discourse with Moses, and Moses is beginning to tell God, listen, God, I have not spoken eloquently in my life. And even while I'm talking to you, I'm still slow to speech. And we hear God telling him in verse 11, who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? And I love that God lays it out like that, because when you're talking to the Creator of the world, don't ever forget who made this thing. Don't ever forget and think that your circumstances are insurmountable and they're so big that the God of the universe cannot do something to immediately change the situation or leave it as it is. It is within his purview to do what is necessary to bring about his divine plan. And so what I don't really like about this story, again, just being honest, is that Moses doubts himself to the point where God becomes angry and he has to get Aaron involved. We know that Aaron was never a part of the plan. It was never a part of the plan that Aaron was supposed to assist Moses in this, because that was never what God said up until this point. But Moses's self-doubt about his own adequacy to do the thing that God said, listen, I'm going to be with you. We're going to do this together. But Moses kept playing that same story in his mind about his own inadequacies and being slow to speech. And because of that really angered God. And now God is, you know what? Let's just go ahead and bring Aaron into the fold. What I don't like about this story is that I can resonate with it. It hits home in a very personal manner because I know what it's like to wrestle with my own inadequacies. I'm sure to the point where it angered God because listen, I called you to this. It's a frustrating story because I can relate to it on a very personal level, but it's a very inspiring story to see that God did not completely throw Moses away. God did not completely say, you know what, we're just going to move forward with Aaron. Moses, we're going to forget about you. God didn't do that. And he could have, right? He very well could have. So if we drop down to the very next section I want to focus on, which is verse 24, this is, I will be honest with you, this portion of the story I did not know until I read the Bible for myself in 2023. We talk about, from a modern perspective, when you go to church, you hear sermons about Moses and about the role that he played in bringing the children of Israel out of Egypt. But you never hear about how God tried to kill Moses. Like, you never hear about that. And I don't know if we just in church, why it's skipped over, why it's not a critical point to highlight. But when I first read it, I had to reread it because I was confused. I was like, what? Wait, what? So if we pick up here with verse 24, it says, at a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him being Moses, and sought to put him to death. Then Zorpah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it and said, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. So he let him alone. It was then that she said, a bridegroom of blood, because of the circumcision. And so I can only speculate, right? Because I don't know for sure. What I know for sure is that Moses is a Hebrew, so he should have been circumcised, right? Zorpah, and this is the piece where I say it's honestly speculation because I'm not sure, but she must have sensed that as they were traveling on the way back to Egypt, that God was angry. She must have sensed that because there's no reason why she would have just randomly out of nowhere circumcised her son, right? But she decides to circumcise her son, and not only circumcise her son, but to take that circumcised area and rub it on the feet of Moses and talk about this being the bridegroom of blood. Me as a human, just speculating upon speculating, not knowing, it just baffled me. And I think it baffled me, to be honest, because as I mentioned earlier, this is not something that you hear about in church. You don't hear about God trying to kill Moses. You only hear about the great feats of Moses. And that's why I think it's incredible when you actually sit down and you read the word for yourself, because you begin to gain these insights and you begin to understand that even though Moses is as great as he is, his own son is not circumcised. And we know that circumcision is important. So let's get into chapter 5 of Exodus. Exodus chapter 5, making bricks without straw. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went and said to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness. But Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go. Then they said, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go on a 3 days journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword. But the king of Egypt said to them, Moses and Aaron, why do you take the people away from their work? Get back to your burdens. And Pharaoh said, behold, the people of the land are now many, and you make them rest from their burdens? The same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people and their foremen, you shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks as in the past. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. But the number of bricks that they made in the past, you shall impose on them. You shall by no means reduce it, for they are idle. Therefore they cry, let us go and sacrifice to our God. Let heavier work be laid on the men, that they may labor at it and pay no regard to lying words. The taskmasters and the foremen of the people went out and said to the people, thus says Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. Go and get your straw yourselves, wherever you can find it, but your work will not be reduced in the least. So the people were scattered throughout all the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. The taskmasters were urgent, saying, complete your work, your daily task each day as when there was straw. And the foremen of the people of Israel, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and were asked, why have you not done all your task of making bricks today and yesterday as in the past? Then the foremen of the people of Israel came and cried to Pharaoh, why do you treat your servants like this? No straw is given to your servants, yet they say to us, make bricks. And behold, your servants are beaten, but the fault is in your own people. But he said, you are idle. That is why you say, let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. Go now and work. No straw will be given you, but you must still deliver the same number of bricks. The foremen of the people of Israel saw that they were in trouble when they said, you shall by no means reduce your number of bricks, your daily task each day. They met Moses and Aaron, who were waiting for them as they came out from Pharaoh, and they said, the Lord look upon you and judge you, because you have made us stink in the sight of Pharaoh and his servants, and have put a sword in their hand to kill us. Then Moses turned to the Lord and said, O Lord, why have you done evil to this people? Why did you ever send me? For since I have come to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all. Chapter 5. Guys, chapter 5, for me, just to recap what happened here, we're seeing that because Moses went to Pharaoh and Moses and Aaron, because they went to Pharaoh and they asked him to let them go, to let the Israelites go so they could worship God for 3 days. We see that this angers Pharaoh to a different level, and he hardened his heart. And as the Israelites in their labor, they were used to getting at least straw, and from there they would make bricks to be able to build the buildings of that time. And so Pharaoh in his anger said, we're not going to give them any more straw because they have too much time on their hands to want to go out and worship their God. And so when they were not making their normal quota of bricks, we see that the foremen, who were Hebrews, who were over, I'm assuming given the context of what it means to be a foreman today, they were over portions of Israelites who were building the bricks. Those foremen were the ones that were beaten because they were not making their quota of bricks. And we see that Pharaoh is unyielding. Pharaoh is not bending. Pharaoh is demanding that they make the same number of bricks that they were making as if they were given the straw. And I think the toughest piece of this entire thing outside of them being beaten is really when the foreman comes out from having spoken to Pharaoh, and we see that Moses and Aaron are waiting for him to come out. And he says to them in verse 21, the Lord look on you and judge, because you have made us stink in the sight of Pharaoh and his servants, and have put a sword in their hand to kill us. These are the same people as we saw at the very end of the last chapter, that where Moses came and Aaron came with this good news that God heard them, that they were going to be delivered. These were the same people that bowed down and worshiped. And unfortunately, because of the way this was delivered to Pharaoh and Pharaoh's heart was hardened, they don't get the immediate release from their burdens that they might have thought. And unfortunately, things got worse. And we see as a response to this exchange that Moses then turns to God and says, God, why have you done evil to this people? And why did you ever send me? Ever since I came to speak to Pharaoh in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all. We know that the God that we serve, the God of the universe, he works in mysterious ways, and he works in ways that are far beyond what we could even imagine as humans. And it makes me think about the times in my life where I knew that I felt like, okay, this is a word from the Lord. I know I'm supposed to do this. And then I do the thing that I think came from the Lord, but it doesn't turn out immediately the way that I thought it should. And because of the immediate factor, when it went south or it went left or it took a little longer, I did exactly what Moses did. I turned to the Lord and I'm like, God, what's going on with this? God, what's up with this? God, I thought that this was you. Like, it makes you question exactly what you thought you might have heard from the Lord when things don't end up in rainbows and flowers and you don't end up the fairy tale ending. It really makes you sit and question and wonder. But I want you to be encouraged. I want you to know that our God makes no mistakes, and that even if you're going through a challenging time or a challenging season, that you have to stand on what you heard from the Lord, that he does not make any mistakes in these challenges, these obstacles that you're going through. They're only going to make you stronger. They're only going to make you look back and say, man, in that season of my life was when I developed my character. In that season in my life was when I knew that I could trust God on a different level, because even though it didn't look like how I thought it was supposed to look, I was still able to say, that is my God and I will trust in him. And so I just want to encourage you that if you are just like these people, if you are in a season in your life where things are getting harder and not getting better, don't lose hope and don't lose faith. So moving forward from Exodus chapter 5 into Exodus chapter 6, God promises deliverance. But the Lord said to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand he will send them out, and with a strong hand he will drive them out of his land. God spoke to Moses and said to him, I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty, but by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they lived as sojourners. Moreover, I have heard the groaning of the people of Israel, whom the Egyptians hold as slaves, and I have remembered my covenant. Say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched hand and with great acts of judgment. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who has brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will bring you into the land that I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you for a possession. I am the Lord. Moses spoke thus to the people of Israel, but they did not listen to Moses because of their broken spirit and harsh slavery. So the Lord said to Moses, go in, tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the people of Israel go out of his land. But Moses said to the Lord, behold, The people of Israel have not listened to me. How then shall Pharaoh listen to me? For I am of uncircumcised lips. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, and gave them a charge about the people of Israel and about Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt. The genealogy of Moses and Aaron. These are the heads of their fathers' houses, the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, Hanak, Pallu, Hezron, and Carmi. These are the clans of Reuben. The sons of Simeon, Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. These are the clans of Simeon. These are the names of the sons of Levi, according to their generations, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The years of the life of Levi being 137 years. The sons of Gershon, Libni, and Shimei, by their clans. The sons of Kohath, Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. The sons of the life of Kohath being 133 years. The sons of Merari, Mali, and Mushi. These are the clans of the Levites according to their generations. Amram took as his wife Jochebed, his father's sister, and she bore him Aaron and Moses. The years of the life of Amram being 137 years. The sons of Izhar, Kohar, Nepheg, and Zikri. The sons of Uzziel, Mishael, Elisma, and Sitri. Aaron took as his wife Ishabel, the daughter of Abinadab, and the sister of Nahashon, and she bore him Nebed, Abidu, and Ithmar. The sons of Korah, Asir, Elknan, and Abiaspeth. These are the clans of the Korites. Elisar, Aaron's son, took as his wife one of the daughters of Putiel, and she bore him Phinehas. These are the heads of the fathers' houses of the Levites by their clans. These are the Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said, bring out the people of Israel from the land of Egypt by their host. It was they who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, about bringing out the people of Israel from Egypt, this Moses and this Aaron. On the day when the Lord spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt, the Lord said to Moses, I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all that I say to you. But Moses said to the Lord, behold, I am of uncircumcised lips. So chapter 6, I want to point out a few things about this chapter. The first really being verses 2 all the way down to verse 9. And this is where we see God establishing the fact that they need to remember that I am the Lord. I am the same God who was the father of Abraham, the father of Isaac, and the father of Jacob, and that I am going to bring them out of this land. And this is where I think in general, as a human, it's hard to walk by faith, but it's different when the Creator is specifically telling you that this is His plan. I love the fact that we see in chapter 6 in verse 2 through really verse 9 that this is where God is continuing to remind Moses, number one, who I am. I am the God of Isaac. I am the God of Abraham. I am the God of Jacob. Like reminding him to not forget exactly who I am and reminding him that he is going to bring these people out of this land. Don't ever forget that this is what I am doing. This is why you're here, right? And then we see in verse 9 that Moses tells the people everything God said from verse 2 to verse 8. And they don't listen to Moses because unfortunately the burden of their current situation has gotten in their head and they're like, not believing it, not hearing it. And they unfortunately allowed their circumstances to make them deaf to the word of the Lord. And that is personally my prayer, is that I never allow life circumstances to ever make me deaf to what God is saying to me. And I pray that over you as well, that you never allow what life is throwing at you to make you turn a deaf ear to something that God is literally saying as clear as day. And we see that because the people did not receive what Moses had to say to them, unfortunately, that hurts Moses' confidence, because he says here in verse 10, so the Lord said to Moses, go in and tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the people of Israel go out of his land. But verse 12, Moses said to the Lord, behold, the people of Israel have not listened to me. How then shall Pharaoh listen to me? For I am of uncircumcised lips. These people, your people, have not listened to me. Pharaoh, who clearly already stated he doesn't even know the Lord, the God of the Hebrews. So why is Pharaoh going to listen to me? And so it's understandable why Moses feels the way that he feels, because he's really stuck in between trying to get the people to continue to listen and not lose hope and not lose faith. But he's also, unfortunately, allowing their lack of hope and their lack of faith to affect the direct guidance that he's being given from God. It's definitely a hard spot to be in. And again, as much as I love going to church, and I still go to church and I still listen to sermons, I want you guys, as you're reading this, to think about the fact that this is the additional level of detail that you gain when you read the word for yourself. Even if you say, Rakia, I'm not listening to you anymore, I'm going to keep reading the word for myself. Do it, please. Because this is the type of stuff that you gain a deeper appreciation for. Think about how God must feel dealing with humans, having to go back and forth and struggling with Moses, and now having to loop in Aaron and still going back and forth with Moses, because it seems like if something happens, Moses gets rattled and he's thrown off his rocker. It really brings the situation from a 45-minute sermon to a deeper level of understanding when you actually read the word for yourself. And so, getting back into the word and off of my tangent, we're going to get into the genealogy of Moses and Aaron. And what I love about this genealogy is that it confirms and gives us the actual names of the individuals that were Moses' father and Aaron's father, and how they come on the scene. The most important thing that I recognize from this genealogy that we saw at the very beginning of Exodus is that Moses and Aaron are from the house of Levi. That is critical, and that's where they're from. And I know that sometimes when you read genealogies, it can be like, okay, this is the great grandfather, we get into the grandfather, and it can just be boring. But I would encourage you, especially if you have your physical Bible in front of you, to really begin to build out what that family tree looks like. Because remember, the Bible tells us nothing by mistake. Every single word is God breathed and was written intentionally. And it is important for us to never gloss over something and think that it's a small detail. Like I'm telling you guys, if you're on this journey and you're committed to reading the Bible every single year through and through, you are going to end up getting closer to God. You are going to end up gaining insights from those small details that you thought were not important. This is my second time through, and I'm realizing the importance of genealogy. I am realizing the importance of, okay, this person came from this household. And why is it important? It's important as we continue to get into the word and we see that God begins to make promises, and he says, and he'll say certain things like the Messiah is going to come from the house of David. We'd have to follow the genealogy to be able to understand that and to really know the impact of those type of statements. And so I would encourage you that as you're reading the word, to remember that every word is intentional. Everything that is written in this book is meant to give us additional level of insight and additional clarity. Hopefully, you guys found this commentary helpful. You learned something about the word that you hadn't known before. As always, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. Please feel free to shoot me an email. I would absolutely love to hear from you. Love to hear what you're gaining by going through this journey of actually reading the word for yourself. And until tomorrow, when we pick up with Exodus 7, bye guys. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you found some value out of this content. If you did, please leave me a rating or a review wherever you are listening. This would mean the absolute world to me, and I'd love to hear from you on social media. Please feel free to reach out on Twitter at hiseternalword1, and please feel free to visit the website at www.thedailybiblereader.com. And I hope you stay tuned for the next episode.